Good day, people. So, Friedrich Nietzsche was a 19th century philosopher, and he's really one of the great thinkers in history. And this is from his book, The Gay Science, which is probably better translated as The Happy Wisdom. And the book is set up in terms of aphorisms and maxims. And this one is about brief habits, and I just want you to reflect on what you do on a sort of ordinary day-to-day basis that is sort of, I think what you'll find is there's a lot of repetition. And so for example, right now I'm drinking coffee. Generally every morning I have coffee. I'm sure there'll be a time somewhere in the future, maybe I'll switch to tea or something for health, but I've been drinking coffee for years and years. Um, and that would be the case for multimedia as well. What are your habits? What do you do? Do you, do you search Facebook, or do you do the streaks on Snap, or right? And the point is, the Greeks said habit and morality are really derived from the same thing. So if you want to know what your morality is, your kind of sense of right and wrong and good and bad, look at your day-to-day habits. And so this is just really one long paragraph, but I broke it up, and I'm just going to go at it. Brief habits, Friedrich Nietzsche. He says, I love brief habits and consider them invaluable means for getting to know many things and states down to the bottom of their sweetness and bitterness. My nature is designed entirely for brief habits, even in the needs of its physical health, and generally as far as I can see it all, from the lowest to the highest. So he's kind of putting a brief habit in tension with what he calls an enduring habit, or something that is more long-standing. Nietzsche continues. He says, I always believe this will give me lasting satisfaction. Even brief habits have this faith of passion, this faith in eternity, and that I am to be envied for having found and recognized it. And now it nourishes me at noon and in the evening, and spreads a deep contentment around itself and into me, so that I desire nothing else without having to compare, despise, or hate. Nietzsche continues. He says, in one day its time is up. The good thing parts from me, not as something that now disgusts me, but peacefully and sated with me. Sated means this kind of fulfillment, or being filled. As I it, and as if we ought to be grateful to each other, and so shake hands to say farewell. I mean, remember, he's talking about his habit that he is now quits with, right? He's done. There comes a day when he just feels enough is enough. All right, Nietzsche continues. He says, and already the new waits at the door along with my faith, the indestructible fool and sage, that this new thing will be the right thing, the last right thing, right? So this how the point is how we move uh, from kind of what, habit or action. Maybe action is a better way to look at it. We have these sets of actions. So for me, I used to skateboard, then I stopped skateboarding, right? I used to take long walks, and because of the weather I haven't, and now I take just, think about your eating habits and the kind of stuff. I mean, there was a time when I was like straight protein, and now I'm more vegetables, right? And so um, and then kind of going back to our pop culture, right? I mean, there was a time when I thought Facebook was useful and it was a part of my life. Now it's I never post on Facebook, very rarely. Nietzsche continues, he says, right, and he's talking about these brief habits, right? He says, this happens to me with dishes, thoughts, people, cities, poems, music, doctrines, daily schedules, and ways of living. And so the I want you to reflect on how something becomes habitual. It's this notion, it's phenomenological notion. Phenomenology is just kind of like the study of being and how we are and act. It's sort of grows out of existentialism, right? And so habits grow out of this idea of familiarity. Familiarity, right? So you go into a novel environment or you try something new, and there's this uh, you have expectations, but you really don't know what's going to happen. And at first, you're in a kind of disequilibrium, right? You can be lost, and you're kind of jet lagged, and there is a kind of culture shock. For example, if you go into a different city that's radically different from your own, especially if they speak a different language. But then what happens if you go to a new place is slowly but surely something happens called familiarity. Familiarity. And that is how the habitual sets in. We grow accustomed and accultured to whatever experiences that bombard our senses. Even if that would be like prison or a concentration camp or some right, the novel always becomes habitual and familiar if there's the possibility of some repetition. So, I'm going to start at the top and then finish the whole thing. This happens to me with dishes, thoughts, people, cities, poems, music, doctrines, daily schedules, and ways of living. Enduring habits, right? That's the opposite of the brief habits. Enduring habits, however, I hate and feel as if a tyrant or a dictator has come near me and the air around me is thickening when events take a shape that seems inevitably to produce enduring habits. For instance, owing to an official position, constant relations with the same people, a permanent residence, or uniquely good health. And so that's, for Nietzsche, this idea of sameness he just can't stand. And I think this sort of explains his own life. He never married. He had, I guess, some various friends. I mean, he was really a loner who kind of kept to the hills of Switzerland and Austria. And then he closes, he says, "Yes, at the very bottom of my soul, I am grateful to all my misery and illnesses and whatever is imperfect in me, because they provide 100 back doors through which I can escape enduring habits." Right? So he really doesn't like the sameness of something that endures and persists through time. He closes, he says, "To me, the most intolerable, the truly terrible, would of course be a life entirely without habits, a life that continually demanded improvisation. That would be my exile and my Siberia." And so to have no familiarity, to have no sort of habitual grounding would be this sort of random chaos, and you, you wouldn't know, like how to move or negotiate anything because nothing would be predictable.